So do you want to go into the Florida State data now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Oh, but then my cycle history. So to conclude my cycle history, after 2016 Florida State prep, I competed again in 2017. I did a bunch of dumb shit that I regret. Way too much cardio, horrible training. It was way too high in volume, way too low in intensity. It was my worst competition season. It's one that I just like to leave in the past. And then in late 2017, I got a job offer that I ended up not taking to move to China to work with the Chinese rowing team. So I just completely stopped cold turkey. I did not take any PCT. I went from cruising on 150 milligrams of test a week to absolutely nothing. No PCT, no HCG, no Nolva, no Clomid, absolutely nothing. I just completely stopped.
Later, can we talk about how that worked out for you?
Yeah, people are probably like, why the hell did you do that? I was just like, I mean, it was at a point where
say that's the move. So
yeah, there are a lot of people that just say, you know what, just stop the drug, just completely shut everything down and let your body recover naturally. I honestly didn't feel too bad after stopping everything. I switched over to Olympic weightlifting. So I completely stopped bodybuilding because I was just really burnt out on bodybuilding as a whole. Switched over to Olympic weightlifting. And I mean, obviously, whenever you switch from one style of lifting to another, you get this huge spike or this huge compensation where you get good. You get that neurological adaptation. So I got good at it. So I felt like I wasn't getting weak. I felt like I wasn't getting small, but I was losing quite a bit of weight. I think at my heaviest, I think I was like 253, full beefcake, cycled up mode. And then I think by the time I started my most recent contest prep, I was like 210, 211. So I lost probably like 40, 45 pounds.
And you did lose. Well, I guess it's hard to say what that's from, but you did lose quite a bit of strength. Because I remember you doing squat videos, like 450 something pounds for like sets of 10. And now like what, you're squatting in the 3 somethings for sets of 10 or so?
Yeah, at my best, I could probably squat 200 kilos, 440 for like a set of 10 to 12. And now I can do it for probably 1 to 2. Mm-hmm. Of the 40 pounds that I lost, I suspect that most of it was muscle, like a very large majority of it. Because you have to think of the fact that I not only completely tanked all my hormones and went completely hypogonadal. I got my test checked. It was in the low 200s when I first came off, when everything had cleared out of my system. So I basically tanked everything, made myself extremely hypo. And then I switched over to a very low volume style of training. So like my chest completely disappeared.
Not just low volume, but a style of training that just lacks a lot of aspects largely that make ideal hypertrophy training ideal.
Yeah, I definitely was not doing any hyper. So like my chest, I wasn't doing any chest training because I needed my chest to loosen up so I could get my overhead position where it needed to be. I wasn't doing any back training. I wasn't doing any direct arm training. And all of my leg training was essentially just cleans, snatches, front squats. So I wasn't really doing any like leg press or leg extension or any direct leg training either. So yeah, if you wrote a book on how to lose as much muscle as possible, as fast as possible, you would probably follow my method. Stop taking drugs, eat like sort of like an asshole, and switch over to Olympic weightlifting and just watch yourself fade away into smallness. And we'll talk about, I think someone in the Q&A asked like, what was like the mental aspect of it like in terms of like watching yourself wither away? I cried myself to sleep every night. Spoiler alert.
Jimbo rubbed your head.
Didn't get that much worse because you already hate your life. So
that's it. That's a very long-winded cycle history, competition history, and all of that. So we can kind of get into, if you scroll up, can kind of get into the Florida State Championship prep data. Because a lot of people were asking questions on this about like, nutritionally, what did you do different? Cardio, what did you do different? Training, all that kind of stuff. What did you do different? So we'll start with the drugs on the Florida State Championship prep, where I won the heavyweight and got second in the overall. I had a guy drop into it last second who was headed to nationals. He ended up placing second at nationals. He was a super heavy. He was the largest human being that I've ever seen in person. He said he weighed in at 272 and he was shredded.
How tall was he?
He's probably like 6'1", 6'2". He's an absolute monster. Like, there's pictures of me standing next to the other heavyweights on stage, and I look huge. As soon as you put me next to that guy, I look like NPC bikini status.
Natural.
Seriously, even more natural than now. All right, so in the 2016, the Florida State Championship prep, so we get the sheet in front of us right now. Maybe I'll have Lenny like edit it in and get like a screenshot of it. That'd be pretty cool, so that everyone else can kind of see it as well. The nutrition. So the starting macros for prep, I was around 235-ish, we'll say. So the starting macros for what's up?
What was your starting weight?
I think I weighed around 235 when I started that prep. It was like 232 to 235.
And what was your starting weight for the Holiday Classic? And
the Holiday Classic, I started at 213, a very chunky 213. Somehow fat, but also had no muscle.
Skinny.
Hard to accomplish, but I get it done. So the starting macros for the Florida State prep were around 300 grams protein, 450 grams carbs, roughly around 40 grams of fiber a day, and 70 grams of fat. I've always been someone who diets on higher protein. There is no magic to my higher protein dieting. I just like to eat foods that are higher in protein. Just like it. That's what I do. And then when it comes to fat versus carbohydrates, I opt for the lower fat approach. I opt for a lower fat approach whether I'm going enhanced or natural, which some people don't do that. Some people say, oh, you can get away with lower fat when you're enhanced, which is true. I use the same approach when I prepped drug free, and I didn't really notice much of a difference. But my finishing macros for the Florida State prep, I finished at around 300 grams of protein, 80 grams of carbs a day, 40 grams of fiber, and 50 grams of fat. At the beginning of prep, I was doing around 2 refeeds per week. My refeeds are about 110% of my normal calories. And then I just take those extra calories and I throw them at carbohydrates. And then finishing macros, no refeeds at the end, just straight through every single day. It was like that. So anything stand out to you guys there? Anything weird on that in terms of starting and finishing?
What was your finishing weight for Florida State, and then finishing
My
weight?
lowest weigh-in was 221. 221.
And then
I think I was like 227 on stage. Lowest weight for the Mel Chansey was 189.8. We'll call it 190, so people don't think I'm skinny.
What are you, 5'11"?
5'11", yeah.
Would you say that your level of conditioning was pretty similar?
I think that I was probably around 2 pounds behind my conditioning from the Florida State. I think I still could have lost another 2 pounds, and I would have matched my conditioning from the Florida State. So probably somewhere around that 0.5 to 0.8% body fat, leaner in the Florida State prep. I really had to, one other note about the nutrition was I really had to push my calories a lot lower, specifically my carbohydrates a lot lower, because I was scared about making weight. I think I was like 227 or 228 at about 10 days out. So I was really, really panicking in terms of if I was going to make the 225 weight cutoff for heavyweights. But then peak week came and I lost like 6 pounds in a couple days. Yeah, so Cam's kind of putting in some cool numbers on here that you guys will be able to see when we push this live. And so this, on the starting macros, he did some quick math. I was around a 5% deficit if we use the 16 times body weight calories for maintenance. And then finishing macros, I was around a 32% deficit on 16 times body weight. So we see an increase of 27% in terms of the deficit when it comes to the start to the finish of that prep, which isn't terribly uncommon. You get some people that have to run even steeper deficits than that. And you'll see kind of when we get down to the Mel Chansey data, the Holiday Classic data, that the deficit was even more severe down there.
Yeah, and I just kept, obviously, I'm sure that your energy expenditure and everything was not to the same degree it was at the start of a prep, but just to keep things constant between both when comparing them. Yeah, you estimated a 32% ending deficit on the Florida State Championship prep at 221 pounds. And then at the end of the Holiday Classic, still keeping it at that 16 times body weight, you finished an estimated 38% deficit.
Yeah, so the deficit was a little steeper. I think that the difference in the deficit is probably, we can probably chalk that up to lifestyle. When I was doing the Florida State prep, I was working security at a bar 3 to 4 nights a week. And then I was also working, or I was interning as a strength coach. So I was on my feet a lot more. I don't have any step count data from back then, but I would assume that because my jobs were a lot more physical back then, that my calorie expenditure, my TDE was a lot higher during the Florida State prep, whereas now I pretty much just work from home. I sit behind my desk.
Yeah, and also given that you probably maintained and had a lot more muscle mass on you too for the Florida State prep, that might do a big degree as far as that need to get.
For sure. So moving down to training now. My training for the Florida State prep was brutal, to say the least. It was very aggressive. I was very much in love with a push-pull leg split. So it was a 3-day rotation, or 3 days, and then a 9-day rotation with linear increases in intensity. So an example of that would be like my first push session would be like 65% of my 1 rep max. My second push session will be 70%, and then my next one will be 75. And then when I finished that rotation, or I finished my escalation and adding sets, I would start back over at the beginning sets, but I would increase my percentages by about 2.5%, and I would drop the reps by 1. So I think I started with like 12s, 10s, and 8s, made my way down to 11s, 9s, and 7s, 10s, 8s, and 6s, so on and so forth. I trained 7 days a week. I took no days off. That prep, I prepped for 21 weeks, and I did not have 1 day off from the gym. Optimal, not even close, but it was what I wanted to do at the time, so I charged it. Yeah, so sets were added weekly. I would say I was probably doing anywhere from 12 to 20 sets per body part. So I was not going absolutely insane with the sets, but my sets were on the higher end, and my RIRs were almost always 0 to 2. Probably 2 on my first set and 0 by my last set. So there was no increasing or decreasing RIR throughout the weeks. It was kind of just like a start with a relatively, or an easier set, work your way up to a set at the end that basically kills you. And I would get there by
fucking idiot.
Yeah, I know. Craziness. No. I look back on this and I'm like, how did I survive this? How did I survive any of this? But it does go to show you that you can get away with doing a lot of dumb stuff for a short period of time without your body breaking. So, and I think that goes, or kind of goes with some of these studies that we're seeing where people are doing 45, 50, 60 sets a week, and they're still getting results. And it's like the body can handle some crazy shit for a very short period of time. When you add in drugs, your body can handle some crazy shit for a little bit longer of a time. But if you continue to do that crazy shit for an extended or a protracted out period of time, you will break eventually, enhanced, natural, however you want to go. So if I could change my training back then, I most certainly would.
I think even in general, when you talk about like the evidence-based bodybuilding crowd these days, like the knowledge sometimes becomes a handicap, like in an excessive amount, to where like people might be a little too conservative, and just in general, you can probably handle a little more than you think. Some people.
Yeah. I think I look back on this prep and it was just like a perfect example of that. It was just like, I was absolutely hammering. You scroll down my Instagram and you look at some of like the videos from these sessions, like, oh my God, like just crazy, crazy weights for reps and sets that were just outlandish, like stuff that I would never think of doing now. But who's to say that I wasn't benefiting from that back then? Maybe going that hard actually helped me out. I would have definitely fit in with the just train harder crowd.
Honestly, I'm still mentally, psychologically recovering from some of your first programs you wrote for me. So.
Yeah, I mean, but look at you now. You're twice the size of when I met you. Can't fit through any doors without us greasing you up. Stuck in my bedroom. Get the Vaseline.
Help.
Reese's.
So that was my training. Absolute madness. Cardio. If you guys think back, you're gonna look at my cardio and you're gonna be like, HIIT. What a moron. Who actually does HIIT? But if you think back to 2015, 2016, what did the evidence-based crowd say about cardio?
Oh, dude, it was nuts then. Everybody was doing HIIT, man. It was one of those trends.
I was in so I knew nothing about it.
Evidence-based. But I look back on it, like I was running sprints. So when I was interning at UCF, I was doing like sprints with the athletes. I was doing sled pushes. I would do like 8 to 1,200 yard dashes as my cardio with like really short rest periods. And I progressed that. So I started with that around 3 times a week, and I progressed that up to 6 times a week. And then I actually had a good conversation with our boy, Mikey Israel, via a Facebook comment on one of his posts that he made. And it was just about, hey, would you phase out HIIT cardio sessions as you get leaner in favor of lower intensity cardio sessions? I think his response was like, yeah, probably. Thank you. I wrote this like big, long, nicely worded question, and I got a yeah, probably back. But I mean, yeah, probably was a good answer. So that's exactly what I did. So I started phasing out the HIIT sessions in favor of low intensity. I got myself a bike for my apartment, and I got myself an Xbox and Borderlands, and all I would do is just bike and play Xbox for like an hour and a half at a time. So I think I got up to 2 45-minute low intensity sessions per day on the bike in favor of the HIIT. I think I was still doing like 1 or 2 HIIT sessions at the end. It ended up being somewhere around 7,000 calories of cardio a week.
I'm sure you preferred that Xbox in living room instead of sprints.
It was nice. It was nice. I had AC. Time just flies by when you're playing Borderlands instead of I don't know, sprinting or staring at the wall while you do the Stairmaster. I still remember taking a picture of the Stairmaster on the last day of prep because I was like for sure that I was not going to do another bodybuilding show after that, and I was like, see you never, motherfucker. But yeah, so I was a big Stairmaster guy, big Stairmaster and big intervals guy back in the day. And now,
two of like the worst things that you could do for cardio on prep.
Yeah, so like
muscle retention.
Short of just like running outside barefoot on concrete, I think I chose the absolute worst form of cardio that you could do. But I made it through and I was shredded. Anything stand out on cardio? Any comments on cardio from you guys?
I guess did you know how when you get to that point in prep where each leg just feels like 50 pounds, like you wake up one day and you hit that wall?
Yeah.
Do you feel like being enhanced when your recovery was higher, that it was easier, it maybe prolonged that at all? No.
Prolonged it? No. It was equally bad. But yeah, anyone who's ever prepped before knows exactly what Cam's talking about. That point of the diet where each leg feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds and you're like, man, I'm so hungry, but like getting up off the couch right now actually sounds physically impossible. But no, I still hit that same wall. I don't know about you, but I always hit that wall somewhere around like the 4 or 5 week out, probably like the 5 week out mark. And then you're at like 5 weeks out and you're like, holy shit, I have 5 more weeks of this. This is absolutely miserable. But no, nothing.
Yeah,
no real.
At first, you're like, oh, maybe I didn't sleep enough last night. So you get a good night's sleep the next 2 nights, and you're like, it's got to be something else. And then you're like,
I mean, it's the wall.
That's just what it feels like.
I mean, it's just like when you're overreached at the end of a training phase, and like maybe you just hit a PR on bench 3 days ago, and then you go back to bench again, and you're like, why is this heavier? Why is my RPE like 2 points higher than what it should be? It's just fatigue.
It's just, yeah, and there's no real running from it. In prep, you get
just
like
day off, but you got to do the cardio.
You get like an hour here, an hour there where you feel good. Like you get your hour in the morning after you've taken all your stimulants and you drank your coffee and you feel like pretty okay. And then from like 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. when you train, you feel like shit. And then 3 p.m. when you're like very stimmed out for your training session, you feel okay. And then the rest of the day is terrible. So,
or like even on days where you're feeling okay, but like you get on the cardio equipment and your legs just don't want to move. Like I thought I was gonna have an awesome session today, I was feeling good, and then legs start moving, and you're like, I can't.
Yeah, so I know for a fact that back then I was just like so much more passionate about bodybuilding. I just loved bodybuilding so much more because I had that feeling, and I would drag my ass over to the Stairmaster and I would hammer out intervals on like the max level just to get it done, brother. And I the idea of doing that now is just crazy to me. So I'm glad that as you spend time in the sport, you get a little bit smarter, and you realize that there are other ways to do these kind of things. And then that's another one that I kind of changed my opinion on. Is I was always a do more cardio so that you can eat more food guy, and now I'm kind of shifting away from that of like, let's lower the food a little bit and let's a little bit more so that you can get away with doing less cardio.
Here's always I noticed that the medium,
the more cardio I did, just I think it just had this compensatory increase in hunger. Like I just got that much hungrier.
Yeah, there's a medium, but it's never happy.
Yeah, it's never happy.
Like that big diet that we did when I first started working with you, we chose the higher food, more cardio route. And at first it was really nice, because I think I finished that diet pretty lean, like not contest lean, maybe like, what would you say, 10, 15 pounds away or so. Yeah. Pretty damn lean. And at first it was nice having more food, but at a certain point, the cardio, it just flips like a switch to where your hunger is so bad and it just doesn't even matter that you're only in a 10% deficit, And I think it makes it shittier coming out of the diet too, because you don't have as much room to add food and you're just like pulling a bit of cardio away. So like the post diet relief of being done dieting just isn't very gratifying.
And I'm not sure, or I think it would be a hard argument to make that the additional 200 calories of food that you get to eat is more anabolic than the additional 30 or 40 minutes of cardio that you have to do being catabolic, or the additional time that you have to spend doing activity being that much more catabolic. I don't think the extra food is going to do that much for you.
Oh, I know myself and most of some of the athletes I've prepped would always talk about, oh, well, if I'm in the gym doing cardio, then I'm away from food. So
I've heard people make that argument
from
like,
eating.
Yeah, how can I do 3 hours of cardio so that I have to spend 3 less hours at home near food?
Yeah.
All right, so that was my cardio. It's a funny story, but man, I got it done. I would go to the locker room after my intervals and just like sit there and cry. But I looked shredded, so it was all okay. All right, so last point on the Florida State prep would be the drugs. And again, we'll have this up on the screen so you guys can see it. It's pretty simple stuff. I never really took much. The usual 500 milligram test base, 400 of EQ. And this is the first prep that I ever used GH. During prep, I didn't notice much of a difference. The source that I was getting it from, sketchy. I never really got any blood work done on it, so it could have just been HCG or something worthless. So I'm not 100% sure, but for all intents and purposes, I thought that I was taking 4 IUs of generic GH. Finished the prep last 10 weeks, 400 milligrams of prop, 350 Tranase, included Masteron at 350 milligrams. And then I was also taking 50 milligrams of oral Winstrol and the generic GH as well. And then I incorporated Clen at the end as well. I used a protocol that most people that I know that I talk to use like the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off approach for Clen. Never made much sense to me. Start with a really high dosage that gives you a ton of side effects and then completely come off for 2 weeks. So I was more in favor of the escalating doses every 2 weeks. So I started at 40. The next 2 weeks I did 60. Next 2 weeks I did 80. And I never really got that bad of side effects. Supplements that I took, kept it simple. Whey protein after my workout. Sometimes I would have a casein shake before bed, or I would just go with Greek yogurt instead. Multivitamin, fish oil, and then my ECA stack in those last 10 weeks as well. Anything crazy that you guys see on drugs or comments you want to make? Yeah, pretty simple stuff there. I see some of the cycles that guys or even gals use at this point. It absolutely blows my mind what some people are taking out there. Whatever happened to minimum effective dose?
What might be a little neat, maybe something you mentioned. How was sleep? Was sleep any different between preps? Because we always talk about how Tren is awful for sleep and all that. And were you expecting not having that variable for things to be different?
The only thing that I noticed that was different when it came to sleep was that the non-enhanced prep, I was cold and I didn't sleep. When I was using Tren, I had horrible night sweats and I couldn't sleep. So the only side effect that I ever really noticed, basically in the entirety of my use of anabolic drug or anabolic steroids, was the night sweats from Trenbolone. Only side effect I ever got.
And did hunger levels and hunger cues, did they stay the same based off being enhanced versus natural?
About the same, yeah. Let me think. Yeah, about the same. Nothing really changed there. I think maybe some of the hunger from the enhanced prep may have been offset by the fact that I was able to get away with 500 more calories at the end of prep. So maybe that helped me out a little bit. I was definitely hungry at the end. And the biggest signal for hunger, or the biggest trigger of hunger, is going to be those low body fat levels. And in both scenarios, my body fat levels were low. So I got pretty much the same amount of hunger. But Paul, you made a good point before we started recording about how some drugs can actually blunt hunger. Did you want to talk about that?
Or increase it, and so, yeah, I mean, that's a strategy. If you did want to use that as a strategy, more suited probably, it might just be more beneficial earlier. But like you said, when a person gets to a certain leanness and everybody sort of has their own threshold, you're just going to be hungry and nothing's going to override that. But yeah, when it comes to, there in one person, maybe Trenbolone sort of blunts their hunger a little bit, and in another person, maybe not so much. But in general, oral compounds, harsher compounds, with like Anadrol being one of the most notable, tend to curb hunger a little bit. And during massing phases may even make it hard for some people to eat. And then there are some compounds. One that's talked about a lot is like EQ, boldenone, equipoise, which is fairly well known for enhancing appetite. And then there are a lot of other things, like even outside of the androgens, there are different compounds that might enhance appetite as well, like some of the peptide hormones and stuff, GHRPs, insulin, stuff like that.
And then I've noticed with females, any more on the progesterone side of things is increased hunger with females.
What's that?
Like Anadrol with females increasing appetite.
Oh yeah, I haven't had that experience. Just
T-ball.
But yeah, no, that's a really good one. And just in terms of like, especially with females, I have noticed that some compounds will blunt hunger and some will increase. So that plays into the strategy of what to use when. You might not want to. Like, one of my biggest issues with females in the improvement season is getting them to hit their macros so that I can continue to increase food. So certain compounds don't lend themselves well to that period of time and may be best suited for prep.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. That was one thing about EQ that I never noticed either. When I took GHRP6, I got really, really hungry. That was about the only effect that I ever noticed from peptides, was that I was really, really hungry when I took GHRP6, but no additional hunger from EQ. I would always cycle or blast when I was prepping. So even including EQ at the beginning of a prep, maybe it's just because I wasn't lean enough at the time that I didn't notice the increased hunger. But yeah, nothing really to report there. So yeah, hunger. I was hungry as shit. You get lean, you get hungry. There's no running from it. One thing on the nutrition side that I did do this year that differently than in the past was I stayed away from over volumizing my meals. So in the past, I've used like the big salad approach where you take like a full bag of salad mix and like a pound of broccoli and a half pound of chicken. You try and eat that in an attempt to make your hunger go away. If you're actually lean, it doesn't matter how much volume you put in your stomach, you're still going to be hungry. You just feel sick. Yeah. So that's a note.
You get like 30 minutes, maybe an hour where you're like, okay, I can do this. And then like the next hour comes around and you're like, I need to fucking eat.
Starving.
Interested to see if somebody did that every single day of their prep, if their stomach expansion would hold bigger and them not be as full.
Yeah. All right. So that is the Florida State prep. Let's just knock out the other one real quick. So the nutrition on the Mel Chansey. So the 2019, the drug-free prep, starting macros, Cam threw a deficit on there. It was around surplus actually. So we started around an 8% surplus. So when I started my prep, I was coming off of 2 years of Olympic weightlifting. I had just injured my wrist pretty badly to the point where I couldn't do any snatches. I couldn't do any clean and jerks. I couldn't even hold a barbell above my head. So I wanted to start in a bit of a surplus to kind of maybe regain some lost tissue in that early phase and then kind of dig into some deficits from there. So maybe that was a mistake that I made right there in terms of lost time where I could have been in a deficit losing body fat, that on the back end of prep, maybe I would have been a little bit leaner and I could have matched my conditioning at the Florida State. So maybe that was a mistake that I made, but that was a judgment call that I made at the time. Let's start in a little bit of a surplus so that maybe I can regain some muscle.
I mean, potentially, because I would imagine you could think about it both ways. Like your opportunity for recomp was higher, both in like a surplus and a deficit. Potentially, if you had gained enough muscle in that period, maybe that contributed to a little more success towards the end of prep. We don't know that, but
that's a good point.
That up actually.
Huh?
I may have fucked that up actually. The surplus.
I think 3,000 would be a surplus at 213. But yeah, the calories for 3,000. It was 260 grams of protein, 320 grams of carbs, right around 40 grams of fiber, and 65 grams of fat. The finishing macros there, about a 38% deficit. 38% deficit, 1,900 calories, 300 grams of protein, 80 grams of carbs, 40 grams of fiber, and 30 grams of fat. Those last 4 weeks of prep, I ran kind of like a pseudo protein spared modified fast where my only my only sources of carbohydrates in my diet were either fibrous vegetables or were from the small amount of carbohydrate, the small amount of milk sugar that you find in Greek yogurt. I had no other direct sources of carbohydrate in the diet. So it was kind of like a pseudo protein spared modified fast. Body weight dropped very quickly, but very predictably. And I was able to maintain training. I hit some Smith squat PRs in my last couple of weeks of training.
And to clarify, the whole purpose of that was just simply getting calorie intake lower. Like you weren't looking for any magic of just not having carbs or anything like that.
Nope. Wasn't looking for any magic. I just wanted something that was going to get my calories as low as possible while keeping hunger somewhat at bay with the higher protein. You can make the argument that protein is good for satiation. Some people would say it's not true. I still think it is. And then the low carbohydrate and low fat were just to get calories down. I was supplementing with, I think 5 grams of that fat was coming from fish oils, some DHA and EPA, just to make sure that I was getting my essential fatty acids in. Any questions on the nutrition there? Comments there? That last 4 weeks sucked. The number one question, was it terrible? It was not fun, no. But I've had worse. So tell me what you guys think about this. What's worse? Not eating carbohydrates at all or having a very small amount? What would you rather have? No carbohydrates at all, or like 20 grams before you work out?
I am always in favor of some carbohydrates because I just need some rice or something on my chicken to get it down. Like fuck. Yeah.
All right. What do you think, Cam?
I mean, I guess in terms of hoping for improved performance, like of course, yeah, I would take the little bit of carbs. But at that point, I feel like it would just piss me off. Like I'll just be like, dude, what is this? Like, just give me less calories and let me get leaner and stop wasting my time. This is about to feel like ass, anyways.
That's definitely the camp that I'm in. It's like 20 grams ain't gonna do shit for me.
Like
So
I would probably
just cut
honestly
it out.
20 more grams of protein and hope to stay full.
Yep. That was my thought process. So that's why I run the higher protein. Maybe stay fuller, but that extra 20 grams of protein gets those farts even worse. And whew, those protein spared modified farts are no joke.
Well, sometimes it bloats you, and I'll have athletes complain like, "Oh, like I'm bloated." And I'm like, "Cool, that's probably feels a lot better than being starving. Like, you're 4 weeks out, you're not getting on stage tomorrow. Hey, man, you be
Yeah.
good."
Don't worry about what your gut looks like right now. You're going to be fine. But yeah, I definitely noticed that. There was definitely some bloating. I had to be very, very careful in terms of the ratio of like soluble versus insoluble fiber that I went with. Because if I went too far in one direction or the other, it was an absolute nightmare. So I had to be very careful with like the vegetables that I was choosing. But yeah, that was the nutrition side of things. The training side. So I did mention that we were coming from Olympic weightlifting. So I had just come off 2 years of Olympic weightlifting training that was very focused strictly on the weightlifting movements, snatch, clean and jerk, both 3, 4, 5 times a week. I competed in a meet in Orlando, the Road to Youth Nationals or something like that. So when I did come back to training, I took some photos. I posted those on my Instagram. You can kind of see those, the start to finish of what I started. And what you notice is that I basically have no chest, no back, and no arms. So when I wrote my first training program, I said, all right, let's train chest, back, and arms 3 times a week. And we will put legs and shoulders because the Olympic movements are very shoulder heavy. A lot of pressing, a lot of holding overhead that incorporates the shoulders, and then legs 1 to 2 times a week. So I brought my legs down to 1 times a week. Shoulders were at 2 times a week. Everything else was at 3 times a week. I started my exercises at 3 sets in week 1, 3 to 10% load increase in week 2, and then it was just kind of like beat the logbook from there. So as RIRs came down, I just said beat the logbook from there, and I had a lot of success with that style of training. And it's the style of training that in a couple of hypertrophy days that I still have my training now, it's the same style that I use. It's what I use for a lot of my clients as well. So anything on training?
Yeah, when you first started and jumped back into it, and you were hitting those priority body parts 3 times a week, do you feel, due to the fact that you hadn't been training them prior, that you potentially could have gotten away with 2 times, maybe even 1 time a week, and still held high performance from session to session with less dig into recovery? And then maybe worked up frequency or maybe even volume?
Yeah, so twice a week, I think, yeah, you could make an argument that with twice a week, that probably would have given me more recovery time in between sessions. I just think that 1 time a week would have been would not have been enough, because if you look at kind of the literature on intermediate lifters and advanced lifters, which I still would fall in the category of an advanced lifter at that time, when you look at the 1 time a week versus the 2 times a week data, everything is in favor of that 2 times a week. So probably the minimum that I would have chosen was the 2 times a week. And the reason that I chose 1 time a week for legs was because I was still doing 1 Olympic weightlifting session per week. So I was still going in and doing some heavy squats, clean and jerk, and snatch. So I just kind of counted that as a second leg day, which in retrospect, if you've seen the pictures and how much my quads downsized from enhanced to drug-free, that's something that I do regret in terms of only training legs directly once a week. But yeah, to answer your question, I think I could have been completely fine with twice a week. Once a week, probably not.
Okay. And then I've got another question that'll tie back into the training and recovery, but I'm going to wait until we get down near the cardio and steps and everything before I bring it back.
Paul, anything? You look great.
I'm ready.
All right, so all right, yeah. Paul's just staring at drugs. Like, all right, come on, guys, let's speed this up a little bit. All right, so cardio, because it's all the rage now. I was like, I'm gonna try this step count stuff. So Cam always laughs because at the first part of my prep, I was still working at the university and I was still lecturing 5 days a week. So what I would do to get my step count up is I would take my students over to the lab and I would put my lecture up on the wall and I would make them do cardio while we lectured, and I would just get my step count in so that I can get like 12,000 steps a day easy. When I quit my job at the university, then it got a little bit harder. When I quit my job at the university, then I started using what I coined as the cardio / step equivalent. What am I waiting for?
You made them do cardio?
Yeah. I was like, grab a bike, grab a treadmill. We're all going to get our cardio in.
Calories.
I don't want to. It's so hot in here. Shut up. I'm in loafers. Walking on the treadmill. I actually, I bought a pair of shoes that I really liked. Some like work shoes, some nice like chukka boots to wear. And I walked so much during class that I walked the heel out of them. It like ripped off. I had done so much cardio in them. So I ended up quitting my job at the university probably somewhere around like the 10-week out mark. So I wasn't able to get my steps in like that anymore. So I did some walking outside for a little bit, but I live in Florida and it's hot as shit. So that's not really a great option. It's buggy and gross in the summer months. So I coined the cardio step equivalent. And what I did was I would just say 100 calories burned of cardio equals 2,000 steps. I came up with that because most people average somewhere around 2,000 to 2,500 steps in a mile. And me being on the larger side, I burn probably somewhere around 100 calories per mile when I walk it. So therefore, 100 calories should be equal to 2,000 steps. And I would just fill in the gap. So I would maybe, let's say I was at a point in prep where I needed to get 15,000 steps and I only had 5,000 going into my cardio. I needed 10,000 steps. So I would do 500 calories of cardio. 500 calories of cardio makes up or equals that extra 10,000 steps. So that's what I did from there. I started prep at 8,000 steps a day. I got up to 17,000, and that's steps or cardio step equivalent. So near the end of prep, my step count was probably like somewhere around like 3,500 to 5,000. So I needed to do a full 600 calories of cardio every single day on the treadmill. I did all incline walking this prep. Nothing but that. No Stairmaster, no bike, anything like that. I wanted to just completely stick with the incline walking. So I would take the grade up to like 10%, do like 30 to 30.5 miles per hour and just go with it. Cam, you had a question on the cardio?
Yeah, so I was always curious. So obviously with the step count, that's more of a form of low intensity, steady state cardio. Did you feel that given, let's say you burn the same amount of calories, if you dictated half of those to low intensity or maybe all of it through the steps versus when you were enhanced and did it on the Stairmaster, do you feel that it helped improve leg recovery when you did it the low intensity way through the steps?
So I kind of had two schools of thought or two theories there. The first theory on the enhanced side was the high intensity cardio is done faster. So therefore I spend more time over a 24-hour period recovering instead of doing cardio. So that was my old way of thinking. But then I kind of looked at it from imagine the force production and the glycogen depletion and the level of fatigue that you're imposing on your legs when you're doing the intervals on the Stairmaster versus the steps or versus the low intensity where you're really only stressing the aerobic energy system. You're not even tapping into those anaerobic energy systems. So you're probably imposing significantly less fatigue, depleting far less glycogen within the legs and saving a lot more of that for leg training. Now, in both of my preps, on the enhanced prep and the drug-free prep, my leg training went great all the way through. I didn't hit any snags in either. So it's hard for me to say, or it's hard for me to look back and say, this method was better than this method. Without trying the interval method drug-free, it's hard for me to say. But if I had to speculate, I would say that if you want to maintain training intensity, especially in the lower body, that lower intensity cardio for a longer duration is the way to go. And I might change my mind again on that in a couple of years.
Yeah, I'd say if you're comparing enhanced to natural and said that both of them held up with well and pretty relative recovery through the lower half, then that natural modality and how you went about it would probably be the way to go.
Yeah, I would have to agree, because if I look back at the drug-free prep and I kind of run it through my mind of like, could I have done the cardio that I did during that enhanced prep and maintained my leg training? And I really don't think that I could have.
Ooh.
All right, moving it down. So that's the cardio. Yeah, it was pretty much steps all the way through. The first couple weeks I was doing some cardio, calories burned, but then I just switched over fully to steps, or the step equivalent. Drugs, there were none. I used no drugs, unfortunately. But supplements used, I did use whey protein after my workouts. No, I wasn't even taking whey shakes I wasn't doing whey shakes after my workout. I was cooking whey into my my loaf, or my weird pancakes that I make every morning. I was taking 10 grams of creatine daily, taking my fish oil, lower dosages early in prep. As my fats got lower, I took more fish oil to make sure that I was getting the essential fatty acids that I needed. I took a double dose of multivitamin, eating less food, getting less micronutrients you're going to need to cover your bases a little more thoroughly. And then I also took ECA as well. So again, we can have a conversation here as well. Like, was this prep actually drug-free if you used an ECA stack? Some would argue no, some would argue yes. It depends what drugs you're actually looking for. ECA is banned in natural organizations. So again, can't even call this a natural prep if you use something that's banned in natural federations. But can we even call it a drug-free prep? What do you guys think?
I mean, I think that's natural is kind of stupid in a way. Like, you're either drug-free or you're on drugs. Because, I mean, you're taking creatine and fish oil. That's not natural. Like, if you're taking oil that you're not, produced in your body, creatine, like, I don't know. It's not natural. Like, I don't know.
If somebody was ever like, that was not drug free because he took ephedrine, like, fuck you, you're an idiot. Like, go fuck yourself. Like, that's, they would have no concept of like the magnitude of benefit, and what you're gaining out of that. Like, what we care about are things that pretty much make you superhuman, So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's getting superhuman from taking a little bit of Broncaid. So maybe we should call this prep the over-the-counter, not a drug-free prep. It's an over-the-counter prep.
Yeah.
There we go.
I don't know. But yeah, so those are the supplements that I took during this prep. I kept it simple. I also took BCAAs, but Paul told me not to mention that. He said he was going to call me dumb. Just kidding, I didn't take any BCAAs. Didn't take any BCAAs. No BCAAs were harmed in the 2019 Mel Chansey prep.
Yeah, and to any gifted athletes watching this, if you're taking fish oil, you better track it too.
Yes, that is a very good point, especially because at the end of prep, I was taking in 1,900 calories, and 100 of those calories were coming from fish oil. So 1/19, just over 5. I think I did the math right on that. Just over 5% of my total calories for the day were coming from fish oil. So make sure you're tracking that shit, because it definitely does add up.
Yeah, I usually will tell people if they're taking it every single day and you know that there's 3 grams of fat in it, we've got your fat target set at like 60 grams, and put your fat target as 57 on MyFitnessPal.
Yep, that's a good point. What if I'm too poor to afford MyFitnessPal Premium? Then you're probably too poor.
Then you're probably not
afford a coach.
Bodybuilding enough. Probably not making loved ones suffer enough.
All right, that's it from me though. Any closing comments, questions, concerns from you guys?
No.
All right, everybody, we are going to come back for video number 2 where we are going to answer your questions. We have a good deal of questions to answer, so it'll probably be another video that's similar in length to this, around that hour and a half mark. If we do get some more questions, or we put this out on YouTube and people have more questions, we are floating around the idea of doing an IGTV, or an IG live as well. So we can do that to answer some other questions. But for now, that is going to wrap up episode 1 of the natural, over-the-counter, drug-free prep versus enhanced prep. We hope you guys got some good information out of this, or that it was just a good watch. You just stared at Paul's delts the entire time. As always, if you support what we do here at Gifted Performance, sign up on the website. You will get your first 2 weeks free. After that, it is $30 a month. You will get access to 15 training programs, macronutrients, meal planning, all that good stuff. If you want a more personalized approach, like training with one of these two fellows, make sure that you make your free account, click on custom training, and apply to work with one of our one-on-one coaches. If you're looking for Gifted Performance merchandise, or you want to read some of the articles from our coaches, you can hit the store or the blog. That's all my shameless plugging for the day. As always, guys, stay gifted.